When it comes to smoking meats, beef ribs are one of my favorites. So today we're going to be doing a rack of beef back ribs. When it comes to beef ribs, there's a bunch of different options out there. There's beef back ribs, beef short ribs, dino ribs, all sorts of different things. So today I'm going to be doing beef back ribs. The difference is that beef back ribs come from the back of the prime rib, so they're a little bit less fatty. They're much less expensive, so it's a great cut to throw on the smoker, especially when you're doing it for the very first time. Even though they're less meaty than the beef dino ribs, the big, massive bones that people are used to seeing on social media, they're still super delicious, very tender, and that strong beefy flavor comes through very nicely. So let's get right into it. And here is our rack of beef back ribs. So I picked this guy up from Costco for a whopping $18.45. As you can see, it is super bony, not a lot of meat on top. So let's get into it and prep it up. We'll start by patting this thing dry on both sides. Really no other prep is needed. And as you can see, you can clearly see the bones, and all the meat on this is just in between the bones. So the prime rib sits on top, so when this gets trimmed off, all the meat gets cut off the bones, and you only get this delicious meat that's in between. I'm gonna start by applying a little yellow mustard for my binder. You can use hot sauce, you can use really anything here. This will just help the seasoning stick to the meat. So we're gonna do the underside first. Just a nice thin layer, and then just season pretty liberally with your favorite barbecue rub, making sure it gets all coated. Pat that in just a little bit. I'm gonna shake off the excess and repeat on the other side. Our ribs are seasoned up. I'm gonna let these guys hang out on the cutting board while I go fire up the big green eggs. This is gonna allow the seasoning to start to penetrate and get nice and sweaty. Big green eggs coming up to temperature. I'm going to toss in a couple of these wood chunks just for some extra smoke. You can run this with just a lump charcoal. This is going to give it some more of that nice smoky flavor. These are mesquite chunks. I like using wood chunks over wood chips. Wood chips just burn up super fast. These will burn for a nice and long time, giving it a nice smoky flavor throughout the cook. I like to put these guys right around the center part of the egg, so the fire started in the middle. So as it's spread, it's going to ignite these wood chunks, creating that nice smoke throughout the cook. Big green eggs cruising at about 250 degrees. So let's get these ribs on. You can smell the delicious smoke. So this is set up for indirect cooking. I have the plate setter, the grate, the ribs are on top. I'm going to close the lid and let these guys cook away. Our beef ribs have been on for about an hour, so let's take a look at them and we'll start to give them a spritz. They are looking nice. The bark is starting to form. They are looking a little dry, so I'm going to give them a nice misting. Keep that outside nice and wet. When it comes to spritzing liquids, I like to use straight apple cider vinegar. You can use beef broth, you can use water, really up to you. I feel that apple cider vinegar starts to tenderize the meat a little bit more, plus it prevents it from drying on the grill. So continue doing this every hour until these guys finish cooking. And our ribs have been cooking for about 4.5 hours, so let's take a quick look and see how we're doing. Ooh, these things are looking great. Beautiful color. Look how nice and soft. You can see all this meat in between the bones. So I'm going to take my thermometer. I'm just going to check for tenderness. I'm not really looking for a final temperature. I just want to make sure that these are nice and tender. So I just want to take your probe and you want to make sure that it goes in. Look at that, without any resistance. So temp-wise, they're at about 211, 212, which is fine. Again, you want to make sure that they are nice and tender, no resistance, like a hot knife into butter. So the last part of the cook, I'm going to take these off the egg. I'm going to wrap them in foil, put them in my cooler, let them rest for a good hour or so. That's going to stop the cooking process, let all those juices redistribute, and it's going to make for a much better final product.
An hour later.
Ribs have rested, so let's take them out of the foil. Beef ribs are looking really nice. That bark has set in. Since the meat is really just in between the bones, you want to take your knife and then just make your cuts right in between each bone. Here it is, our nice beef rib. So you can see it's just the meat that's in between the bones. Get that nice little smoke ring, nice and squishy. Again, not a whole lot of it, but it is flavorful. So slice off the meat of these bones. Again, one thing to remember, these are not super meaty. It's just the meat that's in between the bones, but it is a super fun thing to make, very easy to make, and it's a great way to get into smoking beef ribs without spending a ton of money like you would on a rack of beef plate ribs, for example. As you can see, this meat is nice and tender, Super juicy. Pulls right apart. You get this delicious bark. It's exactly what you'd expect in beef ribs. Super beefy flavor, get the gelatinous inside, meaty, great flavor, nice smoky flavor from adding those additional wood chunks to the Big Green Egg. Delicious. Just wish there was more of it. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what I'm doing, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to get all the notifications, and I'll see you guys next week. Mm.